is the elevation of the street zoning. Work already.
Recording in progress.
There's the newest meme. People that go bankrupt every year from medical bills, all these countries are a zero, and that's what's 326,000 people a year.
Wow. But has that been checked?
Well, if they fact checked it, they'd probably have to raise the number.
People in Canada do go bankrupt due to medical bills. Zero was not actually accurate. There's a lot of medical things that are not covered under our medical system.
I've never known anyone in Canada to declare bankruptcy over medical bills. Generally speaking, the bankruptcy is to do with people who will actually collect those bills. In Canada, if you can't pay your medical bills, you're not required to declare bankruptcy to get.
That's not consider any matters.
Because I know that when my father had his stroke, we spent around $300,000 to $400,000 in expenses. It's a lot. There's a lot that's not.
I know. I'm not saying that we don't have bills and you can't pay them. They cut off your services, and you're not required to declare bankruptcy to get rid of them.
Priorities.
On enforcement. That will hear at adoption of the agenda. And we're live here. Oh.
Yes, we are. Okay, let's get this meeting underway. Welcome to the February 26th qathet Regional District Board meeting. I'd like to recognize our own this meeting on the traditional territory of the Tla'amin people. We have an agenda in front of us. Would somebody like to move the agenda?
I'd like to move the agenda with the addition of 2 items under new business.
There is a procedure for bringing new items forward.
Yes.
And can you justify the addition of these items?
Yes, they are time sensitive, Chair.
Well, I guess that's an argument to be decided by the board as to whether or not they're time sensitive.
Yes.
What are the items that you wish to bring forward?
The first one is to direct our staff to elevate a motion that was referred to staff on November 6th at the Planning Committee meeting related to the related to the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. It's based on some discussion that occurred yesterday at the Planning Committee meeting and the advice from our CIO to, if we want to prioritize that report, then we'll need to provide direction to staff. Therefore, I've put the motion before us so that way we can expedite that process. And the second motion is to place a moratorium on the enforcement of the zoning bylaw specifically related to Strata Lot 7, District Lot 3692, Group 1, New Westminster District Strata Plan BCS 3610. Because since the application did not pass yesterday, we did hear from our staff that there will not be enforcement, but this would give the property peace of mind until we can sort out the next steps of our zoning bylaw. Hence why I'm bringing them forward as a time-sensitive issue, and I think we can debate the merits of it when we get to those items. So if folks are opposed or in favor, I think we can deal with it when we get to new business, but I do believe that they are time-sensitive and therefore have put them for the Assembly for adoption of the agenda.
Okay, I would disagree. They're time sensitive. I actually think I'm going to take them in order. The first one, you're talking about reprioritizing the tasks that the planning department has. I see something like that being brought up at the March 11th meeting, and we could have a notice of motion and have that on the agenda at that time because of 2 things. One, there may be issues in the community. I can't imagine that I imagine that people in the community might have issues with this. For instance, would this be pushing back everything else that is on their schedule? For instance, the Savory Island OCP. I can imagine the people on Savory probably determine that is a higher priority, and we should give them the opportunity to come and speak to us. I think the other reason why we should look at this on the March 11th board meeting is because then it gives the planning staff an opportunity to explain exactly what that change would mean, what effects that would have on their scheduling. So I think it'd just be fair to give those, our planning department and the public, the opportunity to come forward and be prepared for that, and also give us as directors a bit of time to think about it. Dropping a big one like that on us at this time, I think, is inappropriate. The second item, the moratorium, it has been stated by our staff that this is not a time-sensitive issue. So I don't think that it makes sense to bring it forward now. It can also wait until the March 11th board meeting and go through the proper procedures. That's my thinking. I'm not sure what the next step is, if we would entertain comments from the rest of the board about these items being added as late items, because there are very distinct requirements that need to be met to have something be added. I think adding it at March 11th meeting would not cause us any problems. And then we're actually following our procedure bylaw. Director Elliott, or did you have a comment as a corporate officer before we entertain comments?
Procedurally, entertain a motion to include them on the agenda and then vote on those items. I feel
Okay.
like that's how you can address it. If it's not, I think that's the proper way to do it,
Okay.
unless all agree to move it to March 11th.
Well, I have a feeling we're probably not all going to agree. Is that true?
Yep. Director Garside. Oh, is Director Garside here?
I'm
Anyway,
here. My video
Oh.
decided to disappear. I am here. And
Oops, sorry.
So if you
What-
would like to make a motion to include these on the agenda, we can see if there's a mover and a seconder, and then we can decide.
I have, based on what you've said, Chair, I have no desire to make such a motion.
Okay, we're not quite there yet, so.
Yes, I do believe I put forward the motion. I've heard the comments from the chair, but I think those comments are more related to the debate of the motion themselves. The reason why they are time sensitive, I will reiterate, it was these items were discussed yesterday at the planning committee meeting. We heard about the stress that it will cause for the property owner and the stress that it will create in the community. The first one, which is essentially a prioritization, which was the advice received from our CAO. Hence why we're getting it forward for us today. That way, when we get to our planning committee at the end of March, hopefully we can have the report on the Nootka Street zoning bylaw. And the second one is that the property owner can actually have some peace of mind. Otherwise, they're going to have to wait until the 11th to know whether or not an enforcement letter will be coming to their property. Hence why I do believe it is very time sensitive. I do believe it is worth putting on the agenda. And if the assembly, when we get to that item, feel differently, a motion to postpone might be in order, but I do think it is at least worth discussing on our agenda. And therefore I have put it forward as new business on a time sensitive issue. And if the other directors just feel it's at least time sensitive, then that means we put it on the agenda and then we can discuss the merits of the motion when we get to it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. First off, we have this motion made. We do not have a seconder. Is there a seconder to add these items to the agenda?
Right.
I do believe I moved the motion with the addition, and now that we've had discussion, technically,
No, there was
actually the
discussion.
seconder.
It was myself commenting on the concept of adding it as a motion or as a late item. And based on what the corporate officer said, because we did not have consensus amongst the group, then it was now considered a motion. And you spoke out of order, as we did not have a seconder, and we still do not have a seconder.
Point of order, Chair.
Yes.
Under Robert's rules, if a motion has been moved and a director speaks to it, they are automatically the seconder. So you as chair are actually the seconder for the motion to approve the agenda.
Okay, if we can want to go through this, I'm arguing that I am not the seconder because a motion was not made.
You spoke against it.
This is not your time to speak, Director Gisborne.
You're speaking against the motion.
This is not your time to speak, Director Gisborne. I am the chair.
Yes.
All right. Now, you, as usually comes up in these items, if an item is added, we just don't have it as a motion. We have it as a suggestion. If we get general consensus amongst the board, we just add it and move on. There's no motion, there's no seconder, there's no debate, there's no vote. You introduced the item. I expressed my concerns with it being added as a late item. You insisted that we were not going to have general consensus on this. At that point, it became a motion, and we still do not have a seconder for it. So I'm asking, is there a seconder for this to be added as late items, or with proper procedures are followed?
The procedure.
Okay, so we have a seconder, so now we can discuss it. And Director Elliott, you had your hand up.
Hey, Chair. Procedurally, I think Chair Brander is correct. When you're trying to add things to the agenda, you first seek for consensus. And then if there is no consensus, you're welcome to move. So that is the right procedure for agendas. My comment was going to be that adding it as a notice of motion would elevate it to being publicly available, that it would be discussed in 2 weeks' time. Procedurally, it's better. 2 weeks' time is probably good enough to alleviate the stress that we're talking about. And something as large as elevating a priority for staff does require more thought and information than what we have available at this meeting. There's not even a report to go along with it. So I would be more in favor of adding it to the agenda as a notice of motion for the next meeting because of those reasons.
Yeah, thank you, Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. And I would concur with the notice of motion for the next meeting, because not all members of this board are on the planning committee. Not all of them have the memory of what took place yesterday. And so in order for directors who are on the planning committee to become familiar, it is appropriate for a notice of motion so that they can do some background and get caught up on the issue. So I support, Chair, where you were going with your first comment, that a notice of motion would be appropriate.
You, any other comments? Mr. Gisborne?
Question for our corporate officer. If this motion was to be on the, or motions were to be on the agenda, would they be voted on by members of the planning committee, or would they be ultimately voted on by the entire board? We get to those items if they were added to the agenda.
Thank you.
Elevating the priority for planning for everybody.
I believe this would be areas A, B, C, and D. Just reading the motions right now. I just received them right before the meeting, so. Yeah, so I believe everybody gets to decide what is on the agenda, but at that point in time, if these motions are made, then it would be A, B, C, and D.
And as a quick follow-up, so from our advice from our corporate officer, if the board chooses to have this item at least be on the agenda so we can discuss it under new business, which will come at the end of all the other items, if we do decide to vote on it, it would be only the members of the planning committee, which were all in attendance of our yesterday's planning committee. So that, I do believe that I think our planning committee members are all here from yesterday. They're all up to speed. And I do believe the second one is at least a very important time-sensitive issue, because it does come in, it does affect the property owner who has made an application for rezoning because they are non-compliant with our zoning bylaw, and that application has since been denied. So that will give them kind of a gray area of where they sit with enforcement until March the 11th. And with that, I think it's very concerning. Preferably, I would like to put this item on the agenda of the planning committee, but they're not meeting until the end of March. And a lot can happen when it comes to enforcement on a property owner. And as we heard from our planner, this creates a great deal of stress for the property owner. So even if the first one ends up getting referred or delayed, I do believe the second one is very important to give the property owner applicant the peace of mind to say, hey, you know, we're gonna put a moratorium on the enforcement for that secondary suite until we come up with a decision. I don't want our delays to negatively impact the applicant. And that's one of the reasons why I've said this is time sensitive. Let's just get it on the agenda. And I hope the board will support it to at least discuss it at its appropriate time.
Motions then?
See no reason why not.
There's two motions that Director Gisborne is bringing. Could we vote on them?
I have a question.
Sure. Yeah.
So the areas on the planning committee, they're the only areas impacted by planning committees or planning staff. Because if we're looking at a motion that talks about elevating priority that impacts staff, it would still be that way?
Corporate officer?
Thank you through the chair. Actually, I think with regards to the moratorium on Nooka zoning, that likely would just be A, B, C, D. But planning staff, I'm not aware of what's on their work plan, but I do know that some of the items have to do with like regional parks and things like that. So that likely
thought
would
so.
be,
Yeah, I think those are two different,
yes.
yeah.
I'd be happy to have a friendly amendment that elevates the motion, specifically referred to the planning service workload.
You have a seconder for the motion, for the amendment.
Friendly amendment.
I'm not seeing anything. So let's, I don't see any hands up. We've split them. So the first one we're considering is the, adding the motion to.
New business.
Up here. Yeah, new business regarding Nooka zoning bylaw. So all in favor of adding this to the new business? I see one hand up. All opposed? 6 are, well, 5, I guess.
We should check with.
Yeah,
I would be in favor of a
Yeah.
notice of a motion, adding it to a notice.
Director Garside, are you with us?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to use my, do you want me to say yay or nay? Would that be helpful?
That would be the easiest. Yes, please.
Okay, so it's a
So are
nay.
you
for
in
me.
favor of adding this to the agenda?
What we were just discussing, correct?
Yes.
Answer's nay.
Nay, okay, thank you very much. So moving on to the second one, the moratorium on enforcement of, we have it up here. Is this the same one?
Right.
Yes, okay, so all in favor of including this one on today's agenda? We have Elliott, Lennox, Gisborne, and McCormick and Southcott in favor, and opposed. Self. Director Garside?
4.
Okay, everyone opposed. So we're adding that one, the moratorium on the new business. Now that that has been modified, can we have a motion to approve the agenda as? Thank you, Lennox and Gisborne. Any discussion for that, or are you done? All in favor?
Yeah.
Minutes of the regular board meeting, February 11th, 2025. Any errors or omissions? None. Can I get a mover? Lennox, Director Gisborne, all in favor? Any opposed? Assuming none opposed. Motion's carried. Delegation and inquiries, none, no correspondence. We're going on to the chair's report. Okay, February 6th and 7th, I attended the UBCM Electoral Area Directors Forum in Richmond. Relatively short event. Usually it is run back to back with the LGLA, but unfortunately they had scheduling issues this year, so it was a quick down and back. Had some interesting conversations about topics that are important not just to us, but to obviously to other RDs as well, including small water systems, roads and safety, and shared services. Primary focus of the second day was the RDs themselves, the history, what is currently working, not working, and what changes we would like to see. It is very interactive. You know, everybody's sitting at tables and discussing different things, and information gleaned from the session will be used to shape the type of advocacy that UBCM performs going forward. On the 10th, I had a library trustees meeting. Everything was going well at the library as typical until an overflowing toilet caused flood damage. So this is the second time in a few years that the library is dealing with flood. Likely need to be carpet, drywall, and tile replacements. Luckily, no books were bought, but because when you get insurance companies in to pay for it all, it does take some time before they can arrange contractors. So unfortunately, they're dealing with this for probably at least a few months. And February 12th, I went to the Stillwater Community Advisory Group, where we had 2 reps from the Ministry of Forests entertained us for most of the meeting with an overview of forestry operations in our region and BC-wide. Our changes underway that will take a higher elevation look at the way that forestry is performed in the province with significant input from the First Nations. Director Elliott, as the city representative, was also there, and I imagine she'll have a few comments of her own regarding that presentation. So that's all I've got this month. So Director Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. Couple things of interest. We'll start chronologically. 13th, ended of Wildwood ratepayers. I've been attending ratepayers meetings for many years. They give me a real good sense of what's going on with neighborhoods, because people turn up at these meetings who care about what's going on. So it's more of they traditionally have been more community representative neighborhood organizations. There is a trend, they're heading towards being political, but that's mostly centered in Westview. Anyway, this one was reasonably enjoyable, and usually city councilors turning up help people understand issues going on. 19th, I attended the qathet Living Open House, and there was two or three other businesses there, including Chamber of Commerce represented as well. Really good networking of people for hours, like as many as 50 people there at one time, and they ran it for about 4 hours that afternoon. 21st Banff Mountain Film Festival, very enjoyable. Also, on the 21st, the Vancouver Island Climate Leadership, VICC Climate Leadership quarterly meeting. The discussion was mostly around what this group can actually do productively, considering that the lens on climate has really been changing in the popular perspective. There's a fair bit of reaction going on across our country and Western world. Issues like drinking water, public health, heat are certainly focus events or focus activities, and there's quite a bit of educational work going on by CEA and this particular group as well. So this is my first meeting to this grouping, and I found it very interesting. Nice to be back engaged again. A couple of years since I was really actively engaged, focused towards climate considerations. And on the 24th, the Friends of Stillwater Bluffs AGM, they're increasingly well organized over the past year or two. We're, of course, very interested in what's happening with the Bluffs. Interestingly, I'm president of the Malaspina Land Conservancy Society, which is a charity and holds donated funds for the hopeful eventual purchase of that chunk of the 108 acres down there. It is owned by IT. And that's my report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Moving on to Director McCormick.
Thank you, Chair. First, an update from Tinches. Tinches stands for Texada Island Nonprofit Seniors Housing Society, and they have been to this table many times. However, they've just signed their purchase agreement with Selkirk Mountain Forest Company, and it's a big step for them, and they're very, very pleased with that. They offered, as part of their public comments, praise for our planning staff, Ms. Rodden and Ms. Roberts, regarding the help that they have been with this project. So they're very appreciative of that. On January 30th, I attended the Homelessness Task Force, and that is something I was appointed to by this board. Recently, there's been some questions about that task force and what its mandate is and who's on it. So I thought I might be able to fill in a bit of that. The goal of the group is to identify and opportunities to mitigate impacts of homelessness for those experiencing homelessness and for the broader community. So it's mitigating the impacts of homelessness for those homeless and for the broader community. And as far as the membership of this group, the members on the committee or on the task force at the moment are a representative from Tla'amin Nation, a representative from Vancouver Coastal Health, one from Lift Community Services, who is the organizer, the City of Powell River, your CMP, Emergency Services, the Ministry of Children and Family, and qathet Regional District. And those are the members on that committee. So just to kind of clear that up, I want to take a moment and offer praise for the road crews during the middle of February who plowed so many roads on Texada and kept everything moving really well. They did a great job. So I just want to say thank you to them for that. On the 20th, I had a brief meeting with Annie Wise from Sunshine Coast Tourism, and they are expecting a banner year for tourism. A lot of Canadians are staying at home rather than going south of the border. Plus, a lot of Americans are coming up because of the great deal with the Canadian dollar. So they're preparing for quite a busy year. On February 20th was Tourism Powell River board meeting. And a couple of things to report. The Powell River canoe route has now been officially renamed qathet Canoe Route. And that has been approved by the province. And they have also agreed to write a letter of support for the regional district's lease expansion application to the province regarding Emily Lake on Texada. So that, Chair, is my report. Thank you.
That's great. Well, hey, you had a lot of nice, good news in there. I appreciate that very much.
You need it.
Yeah, and especially the tinges. That's awesome. That's going through, and you know, we always appreciate positive feedback about the work we're doing or the work that our staff is doing. So that's nice of them to say that sort of thing. I'm going to go up to the screen, at least give Director Garside an opportunity. I don't know if she'll have any sort of report, but I certainly didn't want to leave her out.
Oh, thank you for including me, Chair. I didn't have anything brought to me from Andrew, but I will just simply share that as the chair of the ferry committee here, that we continue to have our ongoing, shall we say, challenges with the service provider here on Lasqueti Island, who is still not meeting contract obligations. And so we're taking our small but mighty pens and beginning another letter writing campaign to voice our discouragement and lack of appreciation for not being treated fairly, and certainly for having a contractor who is repeatedly out of contract. And so that's a little bit of that. Being a small community, as you know, because you're not as small as we are, but we certainly feel unrespected in terms of our needs for ferry service, and among a few others, including road servicing as well, which I'm sure you've heard about previously too, same ministry. However, I guess what gives us hope is the same thing that probably gives a lot of Americans hope, is that there will be another chance for a contract renewal. So we're hoping that we can at least have a voice at that table. The other positive news about that is that because the committee that we have, our ferry committee, is part of the Lasqueti Association and is not one of BC Ferries committees, so they can't fire us. And so they will still have to continue to listen to our small but mighty voices. So we continue soldiering on like everybody on the coast. And I do believe that coastal communities need to stand together and make a lot of noise about ferry services, more than we have. I mean, one can only ponder why, after having to file so many complaints, complaints that the FACs were completely disbanded at first opportunity. So yeah. Anyway, that's my small report, and I appreciate the time and listening to all of your well-informed inputs today. So thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Yeah, we feel your pain with the ferries, and Director Fall has kept us up to date on the challenges there over the past 6 years plus now. I'm sorry to hear it's still going on. Director Gifford.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sure I'm going to miss a few things. On the 4th of February, I attended the Regional Connectivity Knowledge Network, which I believe is put on by the UBCM. Talks about connectivity challenges across the province, everything from connected coast to some of the fiber optic installations in the interior. I'm not going to go too much into detail on that. And then on the 6th and I believe 7th, there was the Electoral Area Directors Forum, which was pointed out by our chair, which was an excellent event to attend for electoral area directors. I was very disappointed that it did not coincide with the Local Government Leadership Academy. So that was actually one of the reasons why I will not be attending this year's Local Government Leadership Academy. It is, leaving the community, leaving family too frequently. We do have to pay for the flights and the hotels to go back and forth, and a lot of electoral area directors were expressing their frustration. One of the interesting things that came up repeatedly at the Electoral Area Directors Forum was services and service reviews. I believe there was a regional district. I do not remember which one it was off the top of my head, but apparently they are doing, they're reviewing each service within a 5-year period repeatedly. And I was like, whoa. I guess that got my attention. And I heard that actually right after an electoral area director at my table was complaining about how they've got services in some cases that are 30, 40 years old. They don't know why they're there. And this director was going, like, how do we address this? And I go, we can do a service review. So that was an interesting thing and very timely with the service reviews that we've got going on over here. Also, hold on. My phone did something weird. Then there was, of course, a lot of public response to the Finance Committee discussions that we've had, especially in Electoral Area B, as the proposed 25% requisition increase from Area B got a lot of folks calling my phone constantly. I then made the conscious decision to say, I'm going to host 2 town halls so I don't have to explain this over and over and over again. That way I can actually get back to work on the farm. I hosted my first on the 20th, which was a Thursday. We only had 3 people show up. I thought, well, maybe that's because there's a council meeting. Turns out there was a hockey game. So
Sort of important.
Sort of important. See, I don't pay attention to sports, but that worked out quite well because my projector died halfway through. So we just huddled around the laptop for the last bit. I hosted another town hall on the 23rd, which was attended by maybe 30 to 40 people. I did not bring my projector and I just used kind of like a TV screen. It was well attended. A lot of folks came and expressed themselves and had their own input. And a lot of folks had a lot of paperwork from our regional district budgets. And it was mainly just kind of like, hey, let's talk about how this actually translates from a 25% requisition increase from Area B does not mean that you're going to pay 25% more. And you have to start getting into a lot more, mathematical details. So I'm sure there's going to be more interest. And I've already been getting a lot of folks saying, hey, we want another one of these. So I'm tentatively scheduling one for later on in March. And I find that it actually helps me understand the electoral area B, because we don't have a ratepayers association in area B. We don't really have any of those kind of formal structures. It's usually people just show up on my driveway or give me a call. And I started realizing, it's spring. I'm going to have to start getting to work on the farm. So that was a wonderful kind of event to throw. And with that, I think that's the end of my report, Chair. I'm sure I've missed something, but I'll remember later on.
Probably so. Anyway, great. Thanks very much for that fulsome report. Director Lennox.
Thank you, Chair. Same thing went to the UBCM Directors Forum. For me, it's at first I got to say I was thinking, okay, it's a big commitment to come down to what constitutes one full day, two days, of commitment for one full day. But on the second day is when it solidified for me is the networking, because when you sit down at tables with folks just like you, who have issues just like you, specifically water improvement districts. Wow. If I didn't know that it was an electoral area district problem before, I certainly do now. And the great part is there's people working on these ideas and we need to leverage that. So I got lots of good contacts and I'll be working towards that. I agree that it's too bad. I will miss the local government local leadership academy. So that's a failure there, scheduling those 2 things the way they did, but hopefully next year we'll recover. Sunshine Coast Tourism Workshop. Interesting, all the different tourism groups. I wasn't on the calls you were, but I was on the Sunshine Coast Tourism one. And really, I'm glad I sat in. It was a couple hours, and our local rep, Christine Holman, it was on there with lots of other folks up and down the Sunshine Coast. I won't spend too long. Great presentation. Really, the strategic pillars for tourism in their scope is developing year-round tourism. And we talked a lot about those shoulder seasons and off seasons. And as I sat there looking out the window from my home out over the strait, thinking, yeah, we have it was gorgeous. So we had a talk about that. Working together to manage tourism on the Sunshine Coast, and I think they were glad to hear from some perspective on the upper Sunshine Coast, because a lot of it is geared towards the lower. Tourism benefiting the community, and I actually spoke to a couple of points because there's a lot of impact from tourism in our community. Lund and Savory feel the impact, not necessarily just the benefit, and then empowering their staff to pursue well-rounded success. That's pretty flowery language, but really they did mention that they're going to be needing more resources for their staff in tourism, Sunshine Coast, and MRDT funds came up. And so, that's in our purview as the future comes. So interesting. Lots of calls around good old Ministry of Transportation and Transit. Although, when they do provide the service, as Director McCormick said, people notice that as well. So a lot of facilitating people who to call and how to get some action. In Oakover, the logging has really impacted the road there. So good to hear that MOTT and are considering how to repair the road now. So and then the snow events really help. And Savory is still feeling, the lack of some basic maintenance. And I know I'm hoping to see our letter issued shortly to support local solutions. CIMAC had their meeting. That group is always good, advocating for the marine facility on Savory. Again, looking to the future is going to be interesting about, the long-term replacement of that facility. And currently the firefighting project that we see on our capital planning, that hopefully you'll be understanding more as staff bring that to us. Statutory service reviews, all three of them I'm involved with. So sub-regional recreation, social planning, and Malaspina Fire Department. But glad to be involved, and hopefully we can work on those together and get them completed. I did 3 Savory official community plan open houses on the 18th, 19th, and 20th. Thanks to the staff and Blue Rock Consulting, who really gave folks who haven't had a chance to understand the OCP project, like where we are in time. And really just for folks, we're in stage 2, which is still fairly early, but as the weather improves and people show up, we're going to be doing a lot of that heavy lifting as the summer approaches. So looking forward to that. Good participation from lots of folks, a broad spectrum from the island. I'm almost done. Northside Community Recreation Center, we had an open house. I can't remember the date, but Dawn Construction, the prime contractor, was there, and pretty well attended in a tiny little room. It almost proved the point why we need a bigger center. But they had, their most up-to-date drawings. And I've said this before, but they're just fully engaged with the building committee. And when the community says, hey, what about this? What about this type of floor, siding, whatever? It's just cool to see them responding. So pretty soon we'll see that work underway. And then finally, I always have to thank our first responders out there in those, wind and rain and ice and all those terrible kind of conditions, and our hydro crews, right? Because we did have a couple of outages, but they're pretty short and easy to weather, no pun intended. So
thanks very much. Yeah, you mentioned we've said it around this table many times, the water systems, how it's not just our regional district dealing with it, and this is a problem that is just going to keep building over the years. So hopefully the province, all of us banding together and bringing attention to it will get the province focused on it. Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Director Lennox, for reminding me of the one thing I missed, which was the service review committee meeting.
We got a lot of work to do.
I mentioned it in my other parts of the report, but yes, that's a lot of us attended that as well. Thank you for bringing that up.
Director Elliott.
So way back on January 30th, I attended a conference call that was for mayors mainly. I was acting mayor that month, and Mayor Wasnow couldn't make it. And so it was with Amy Bromeg, or however you say her name, the new director of community engagement for BC Ferries. And she tried to have 5 focus questions. And the questions were, how can BC Ferries better collaborate with local governments? What values and principles should guide how BC Ferries engages with local governments? What types of activities or tools work best for sharing ideas and feedback? And how can BC Ferries make it easier to stay informed and participate and engage effectively? And what are the challenges or obstacles that make it hard? And so it was kind of focused on the engagement, and they overwhelmingly received from just about all mayors and across the regions messages of it needs to be direct. The tools that you use or how you do it, or it needs to be intentional, direct, and the main part is responsiveness. So if there's a continuous process of receiving input without any responsiveness to ways to solve problems, then that is what communities get frustrated with. And so the message back to BC Ferries isn't so much how you do it or whether what tools you use. It's more about when problems exist, how do we solve them, and the responsiveness back from what you're hearing. Also, some of the mayors highlighted the idea that they need to be willing to try different things. It can't be just one size fits all to everywhere. And there should be programs out that are celebrating innovation. Like if you're soliciting ideas and you're choosing a few of those to implement and celebrate, you know, you want to make people aware of that, and celebrating innovation is how you get innovative. So I guess the messages from most local governments was, we don't want you just asking your passengers stuff. You want to engage with local governments. You should engage directly with local governments. And you should be prepared to have answers or have feedback from what you're hearing, not just stand there hearing. And so that was okay. February 10th, I attended a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and we had a bunch going on in there, but some of the things I think people might be interested in are the golf tournament this year is on May 31st. It's the charity partnership with the Rotary. Last year it was $125 to participate, and this year they think it will be the same, but they're not entirely sure there until they crunch some numbers. The business awards nominations are open till the end of February, and that's for their gala that usually happens in April. And so anybody interested in nominating someone for a business award should do that by the end of this month, which is like Friday. So everybody should get on that. And so their AGM will be in June, and if you're interested in a position on the Chamber of Commerce, you should probably get your name into the manager there in April so that they can vet and figure out how to include you. The Community Action Team, the CATS. I belong to a subcommittee that is called the Education Subcommittee, and we are coming out this March 1st with our very first monthly newsletter, and there'll be one out on the 1st of every month. And the newsletter arrives in your email box, and you need to sign up for it if you want to receive it. And you can sign up at qcat.ca/education. So if you go to qcat.ca, there's a little menu pop down thing. You go under resources, one of them's called newsletter or education. You go there and you sign up for the newsletter, and it will arrive in your email box. And it's all about the harm reduction and everything the community action team is working on within your community and keeps you up to date, as well as explaining services that we're doing. We have features on people who are accessing services and are interested in our community success stories. We're going to be trying to roll out one of them every month. Our QCAT people also met with Qathet Living magazine, and we've got 2 articles we'll be putting out in collaboration with Qathet Living, one in June focused on youth, and one that will be a series of success stories from our own community, which we don't have a date yet for, but we're still working on that. And so that's what we're doing over at the Education Committee on the QCAT. We did have an actual CAT meeting too, and we talked to Modi Kakapa, who is our public health official, about finding the wonderful stats that come out to the CAT are not like publicly put out. And so we're going to be working with our public health officer to find a way to put out through our newsletters rolled up statistics in an easy to understand way that relate to drug overdoses and drug testing and the things that we do through the CAT to help make our world safer. And those statistics that come from the public health officer, we're going to be working with her for a presentable way to put that into our newsletters, and those will be we will be the only one with access to those source documents that's coming out on a regular basis in a public way. So stay tuned for that. That was one of the things we talked about at our CAT meeting. The Métis Nation updated us at the CAT meeting that they are having an event to canvass Métis folks all up and down the coast and throughout our region about how they can help with supporting Métis peoples in the for mental health and addictions. And their event is on April 5th in Nanaimo. And so if you're a Métis person and you want to attend, you should contact through your local Métis organization. They do have travel support and honoraria available for people who are Métis who want to attend that event from our community because they realize we're far away. And so they are looking for people to attend and participate in that forum so they can get a better idea how to create services to support mental health and addictions. Lighthouse did a presentation, and they are a virtual medical service that helps with bridging prescriptions when people haven't got access to a doctor or they're on too long of a waiting list. And so they're available. You can call them. They do an intake, and they can provide prescription medications for people for any reason at all that are clients because of addictions or mental health. And so we thought that was a pretty good service because you didn't have to physically go places. You could do it on the phone. That was my CAT meeting. Where else am I at here? Director Branner's quite correct. I did go to the Western Forest Products Community Advisory Committee meeting, and we had the Ministry of Forest folks there, and I learned at that meeting that our wonderful president of our community forest, who is Greg Hempel, was our district manager for quite a long time. I wrote it down. 1993 to 2007, he served as our district manager here in our community. So that was a little piece of history I learned from listening to that. You know, we learned a lot of other things there as well. They talked a little bit about where the long-term AAC in our province was going to land and how they thought they would get there. We'll stay tuned for that one. I went on February 15th to the Black History Month celebration at Dwight Hall, along with a lot of other folks. There was a lot of really good, interesting food there. The speakers were good. They talked about history from a Black perspective, and one of the things I thought was interesting was they thanked the English language for being kind of a uniting way for all of us to understand one another that come from various different backgrounds. And so that was a different way to hear. Thanks for changing our language. Where else did I? Oh, February 7th to 9th, our community had a mixed bonspiel, and I took a team into the mixed bonspiel here in our community, and our team won the B, so that was fun. And I wanted everyone to know that I will be out of country from March 15th to the 30th, and Councillor Isaacson or alternate director Isaacson will be attending meetings here on my stead during that time. That's my report.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to consent agenda. Does anybody want to pull anything off of it? Seeing no hands, would somebody like to move consent? Director McCormick, thank you. Second by Alcott, thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? And carries unanimous. Moving on to 11.1. 2025-2029 financial plan draft 3. We have a number of motions here, but I understand there's been some new information included, which makes some of them not really feasible. Director Gisborne.
Yes, with the important updated information in the revised report, I do think that this would be most appropriate to send back to the Finance Committee. It is occurring on the 11th, and therefore we can look at the proposed changes in a holistic fashion. So if it's okay with everyone, I would actually move that we refer this all of 11.1 to the March, is it 11th Finance Committee meeting?
I can't remember.
Okay.
Yeah, it's March 11th, and that seems reasonable, especially because I imagine Director Fall would like to be part of the conversation. So
yeah,
Director,
If it requires a second, if it requires a seconder for that, I would support that.
right, as long as the corporate officer has that information down. Yep, all good. Okay, any other discussion on the topic of referring it to the Finance Committee meeting? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carried.
I'll say to the objections.
Yeah, and then item 12.1, the recommendation in front of us. Would somebody like to move that? I'll move it. Areas A, B, and C of the sub-regional rec service contribute $238,244 this year to the City of Powder River Rec Service. I have a seconder. You don't get the second. It's just.
Second, but thank you through the chair.
Okay,
But you don't get to vote.
all right.
It's second for you.
Okay, we got a seconder. Director Elliott seconds it. I think this is the right thing to do. I think we are working together with the local government of the city. I think and we have an agreement that is not up to date. I understand it's expired, but I think as a show of good faith, we can use the same formula that we have used over the previous 5 years of the agreement, which using that formula comes up with the number that is in the motion, from what I understand. And I think it would be poor of us to not come forth and offer up that amount, especially given that the 3 electoral areas that are involved in this service, the voters said back when we had the referendum that they were heavily in support of area A, B, and C tax dollars going towards the support of the rec center. So I think it's the right way to go. I think it's the responsible way to go. And with the service review, we hope to get an agreement in place this coming year, but I think to penalize the city as much, especially given that our voters have said that they want to support it, I think it'd be the wrong thing to do. So, Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks. Maybe this is for the manager of financial services. I honestly can't remember. Is whatever number we may come up with today, is that in our financial draft, or would that be extra? I just can't remember. I'm
Ms.
sorry.
Greenan, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Most of it is in there. We have $233,000 in the budget, so it'd be a bit of an adjustment.
Thank you.
Okay, comment, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting, the conversation of supporting the recreation complex, because the service establishment bylaw doesn't reference the recreation complex. Doesn't mention it. And there is or was a agreement between the regional district and the municipality. And it wasn't in place in the last 5 years. It wasn't in place last year. It was in place in 2023. It expired in 2023. So we didn't have it last year. And we still don't have it. We haven't even had a sit-down conversation with the municipality. I'm not opposed to putting the money aside. So that way, when we actually do have a sit-down conversation with mayor and council or the representatives, that we can say, okay, this is how much we've got on the table, at least for this year. And then that way we can move forward. The concern I have, and one of the reasons why I very much support the principle of the contribution funding agreement, is because the funding agreement isn't just, okay, this is what we give you every year. What the funding agreement outlines is this is the amount and this is what we get locked in for 5 years. What that means is we don't end up having a big argument every year about what the contribution amount is. Come to an agreement, and then for the next 5 years, we move forward. And we don't end up having a confrontational relationship with the municipality. I'm very much in support of working with the municipality to determine, what is this year's contribution. I think that we do also need to have a discussion about what was last year's contribution, because as I recall, the board last year set the budget. I don't recall us actually having a vote between areas A, B, and C about giving the money to the municipality, but the money went to them anyways. So I'm actually opposed to this motion. That doesn't mean I'm opposed to giving the municipality the money for the recreation complex. But one of the things I've been hearing over at City Council is discussion about, cutting back on services so that way they can get within that 5% requisition. Now, my residents, one of the things I heard from some of my folks was, well, if the city's going to cut back on services, should we still be providing the $238,000, or as they thought, the $170,000, which was what the original, referendum discussion was all about. So this is an increase, but we don't have any kind of guarantee on the level of services. We do have a sub-regional recreation service, but that service doesn't reference the recreation complex. The agreement references the recreation complex. That agreement is expired. It doesn't exist anymore. That's something that was covered in our service review discussions. So I'm not opposed to setting the budget, but I am opposed to just handing the money over at this time before we've actually had a sit-down conversation. I think it sets a bad precedent. Like, it's not a good way to negotiate. And I would even be willing to kick this back to Finance Committee. I'm not entirely sure. Because as we've heard, the actual requisition limit is less than what this motion is. I think it was, 133,000, I think was what we heard. So if we approve this, then yes, we'll have to adjust the financial plan. But then there's also the cost for the service review, which I don't think is actually going to be that much because our service review meetings are cost effective. So I'm not in favor of handing the money over at this time without any kind of agreement in place. Because really what it's doing is it's saying, hey, if we don't have an agreement, the municipality will actually get more money from us year over year. Because in the past, we had that $177,000 and that was locked in for 5 years. It wasn't adjusted each over each.
Totally inaccurate.
Right. Hold on. If you're done speaking, I saw Ms. Greenan, did you want to comment? And then I'll go to Director Elliott.
Thank you. I just wanted to address the limit. So that contribution would be within the limit. The limit this year is $334,080.
To clarify, I was not referencing the limit. I was referencing
the requisition limit.
Oh, sorry. I'll correct myself. What I was trying to say is what was the set budget for that item, not what the total requisition limit is. I believe the requisition total is like 300 something.
Just said it.
Yeah.
Really.
So when I read the agreement, there was no set budget for any of the years. It was based on a calculation formula. Each year, you should take the actual cost, apply a formula, and then that was the agreed amount for that year. And that's what this number in the package motion is based on as well. It's based on the old agreement to use a formula based on costs. Those costs are previous year's costs that because it's hard to get an updated cost to base it on. So you're basing it on a less expensive year, not the one that we're even moving forward with here. So the chances that the formula would work out to be less than that is second and like just nil. And here's the point. Sorry, you're right.
Thank you.
Here's the point I want to make. At the city, if we cannot confirm our budget for the rec center, and have commitments for revenue that make sense for us, it may be required for us to mitigate that risk to slash more services than we would otherwise need to. And so while we're deliberating budgets, to be uncertain about what you would contribute at this level does not help the services of the community. The community loves our rec center. They all like those services. And the council, when they deliberate, they all know that. The services that would be provided would more than likely not add up to less than last year's services. It may be that the same services, because of raising wages or whatever, might be a little more expensive than they were last year. But if you're looking at your proportionate costs, you're not looking at proportionate costs of declining budgets, because that's just not what we're dealing with. So it's unrealistic to think that basing a contribution on the old agreement would somehow disadvantage the regional district in any way, shape, or form as far as proportionate costs go. And so while I know the agreement has expired, and there's a lot of reasons over at the city where we didn't have the capacity to approach the regional district at that point in time, I don't think the intention was to stop paying because the city was in a bind. I think we're all trying to provide good services for people, and the rec center is a good service, and whether it's mentioned in the service or not, that was the intention, and that's what people voted on. And so I think we proceed assuming that we would all like to see the recreational services continue, and that this is based on the old formula on actual costs. This would be the proportionate amount that we would contribute, and even though they're outdated from a year ago. So I don't think those points really override the idea that for certainty and for the city to be able to conduct the recreational service, there needs to be some commitment there. And that's what this motion does. It provides a commitment. It doesn't say you're going to write a check tomorrow. It says there's a commitment for this year. And this is what you can count on in your budget, so you can manage your affairs. Okay. And that's what I'd like to see.
I'm just going to speak real quick. Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. You've got to have money. You have to know what you're working with in order to set the budgets for the year. This is a no-brainer for me personally. I look at it and I say the residents of our 3 areas voted heavily in favor of supporting the rec center. The numbers in front of us are based on a formula that has been approved in past years for funding this service. And in the spirit of the whole working together, that's what the local governments are supposed to be trying to do. And I think that if we all work together, we can all benefit. This is one way where it is really, it's something, this is a service, and the rec center, I'm mentioning that specifically, is enjoyed by people in all 3 of our areas. And I'm saying A, B, and C because those are the ones that are involved in this. I think this is a good thing to do. I think it fosters good feelings between the 2 local governments, and I think that we need that kind of thing right now. Dr. Lennox.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I support the complex as well. It is true that this is sub-regional recreation, so it's a little more broad, and sort of once you cut the check, then whoever gets the money can decide how to use it. But I think the intent is there. Just for me, when I read the correspondence from Mayor Wasnow, is actually a request for a 5-year inclusive agreement. So just to be clear about what we're seeing in front of us, and what the recommendation is that we support a 1-year effort for this year. And I believe it's included in the report that August 2nd is sort of when they need their money to make sure that their financial plan goes underway. So I mean, I think that we are all agreeing that the complex is important to us, and that at least I can speak for Area A, that we're prepared to pay our share. And I think a lot of what the points that have been raised that are relevant to this subject will be identified in the service review. And I think that's where we need to get to the answers about sub-regional recreation is at that review. Thanks.
Okay, I'm gonna go to Director Southcott because you've spoken already. Go ahead, Director Southcott.
Sorry, Chair. It's a tiny detail with regard to the mayor's request. There was an amendment to the original motion at the council table that also directed staff to work on compensations for whatever imbalance there might turn out to be fiscally. So that's a very broad, that was a very broad amendment. And I can't really guess where that might go. However, I will remind us of the period between 2003, I think, and 2011, or started resident cards and regional district residents outside the city were charged a surcharge on services for the rec complex. The city council is going to be looking at budget tomorrow. Just a quick look at the report, which was printed for council. It's a real easy report to look at. It gives I think it's page 3 that shows the degree of cuts that this council is considering. I bring that up because costs, it's obvious why we're considering those cuts, I think. I don't think that needs to be discussed. There's a long history with regard to the rec complex and the cost of the rec complex, and there are all sorts of factors. So I am looking forward to discussions that City Council intended to happen at least a year ago. But there's been all sorts of delays. No excuses, it's just that's been the reality. So it is impossible for me to even guess where that might end up. But I am very aware that the complex was built without the agreement of any of the regional electoral areas when the mill paid 50% or more of city taxes. So that was reasonable. But then we can see what the change is. Factors like permissive tax exemptions that the city grants that costs city residents about over $700,000 now will be a critical part of the considerations and various others as well. It's a complex picture, financing for the services that our whole region enjoys. And we're at a time where we really have to work together. So to reiterate, I don't know where that's going to end up, but I just wanted to mention these factors because my impression is that they're being looked at quite carefully, not just by City Council, but many residents in the city, and that this motion represents good faith and goodwill that will go quite a long way to paving a friendly path towards discussions, which I hope to see happen soon. Thank you.
Okay, Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. Conversation has kind of grown tentacles in all kinds of different directions. First, I will clarify when I said that we had a 5-year funding agreement for $177,000, excuse me, and that was locked in for 5 years. I heard that that was not the case and that it got adjusted each year. I'm looking at the 2023 financial plan, sub-regional recreation, $178,500. That includes the $1,500 for administration. That means that in 2023, it was once again $177,000. That number was locked in. It did not change each year. It was a 5-year agreement set at the same dollar value. So what's happening now is it is increasing each year based on what last year's operational costs are. So that is correct. It is correct that the municipality is getting more money from the electoral areas because there is no agreement. That is precisely one of my points. And one of the challenges around the table is a lack of understanding between the municipal council and the electoral areas. I've heard the comments from the municipal directors. It kind of sounds a bit like they're speaking as municipal councillors, not municipal directors, which is fine, but I really want to have that conversation with the municipal councillors when they're acting as municipal councillors. Hearing that there's going to be detailed budget discussions over at the City of Powell River tomorrow has a bit of a concern for me, because while we are talking about $230,000 or something like that, the funding formula for the complex is based on 25%, and 35% multiplied together gives you less than 9% of the overall operational costs of the municipality. So yes, that is a big chunk of change out in the electoral areas, but when the municipality gets it, I don't think it's necessarily going to make or break their services. And what the discussions are going to be over at City Hall, which we are not a part of, it gives me a bit of concern, especially when, you know, if tomorrow the rest of municipal council decides to cut back on services, then we've handed over money, and I think I'm going to be getting an earful from my residents. So really, I think it would actually be more appropriate to actually postpone this item back, or refer it back to the Finance Committee meeting, where we can get the clear and accurate information, because it seems like around the table that there is some inconsistencies with the understanding of the historical nature of the service. And to touch on the point of the electoral areas potentially being charged a surcharge for participating in the complex, because as I've seen, municipal council doesn't feel like we are paying our fair share even when we are handing over the money. Now, the old report from back in the day when the electoral areas were charged a surcharge, the reason why that kind of two-tier system was abandoned was, according to the municipal staff report, was it was actually costing the municipality more money in administration, and they were losing out on revenue due to the lack of people showing up and using the facilities. It wasn't abandoned because of goodwill for the electoral areas. It was abandoned because it cost the municipality money. And that's why I actually want to work with the municipality on addressing a lot of these cost issues, you know, potential regionalization of the recreation complex. But we didn't have the conversation last year after we handed over money last year in goodwill, in good faith, to say, hey, the money gets handed over. Are we going to talk about it? We didn't talk about it in 2023, which was actually the appropriate time to renew our contract for another 5 years. We didn't talk about it in 2024. Now here we are in 2025, we're getting another cost share request. We still don't have an agreement. We still have yet to sit down and talk to municipal council. I very much appreciate the input from our municipal directors, but I'll remind everyone, the municipal directors do not speak on behalf of the district of Powell River, like the incorporated entity of the municipality. The two municipal directors may feel a certain way, but if the rest of municipal council goes another way, that's what we get stuck with. That's why at the regional district, we need to come to an agreement, even if it's only for this year, and then we sort out an agreement for next year. I do not feel comfortable handing over $230,000 from the electoral areas, which is a significant increase from the original $177,000, without even sitting down and have a face-to-face conversation. That's all I'm asking. I'm happy to put it in the budget. I'm happy to put it aside. And then I want to sit down with the municipal council representatives to say, hey, are you going to cut service? Are you going to charge a two-tier rate? What's going to happen with this? Because otherwise we can pass this motion today. Say, staff, hand the money over, and then tomorrow at the council meeting, I might be watching, and maybe the council feels, you know, we need to charge a two-tier rate, or maybe we do need to cut services to the recreation complex. And I don't think less than 9% of their operational budget is going to make or break their decision. We're all in tough financial times. I'm happy to put the money aside, but let's go along the path of, we want to have goodwill and work together. But to work together, you need to talk to each other. And we still haven't done that. We still haven't sat down and talked to municipal council. And there's another little asterisk that's kind of hanging over our head. The $1.4 million of community works funds that's been earmarked through the Resource Recovery Center. That's going to be coming up at our next financial plan. As I understand, the municipal directors can outvote us in the electoral areas. And the municipal council has already said, no, they're not going to contribute their community works funds to this shared service. So I want to work with the municipal council. I think we passed that motion to say, hey, let's share our community works funds for the Resource Recovery Center. And the municipality said no. And now here we are going, well, out of good faith and goodwill, let's hand the money over. Are we actually going to get anything from it? I want to say, yes, we're going to get good stuff out of it, but without actually sitting down and talking to the other party, you know, hope in one hand and what happens in the other.
Yeah, Director Lennox.
Yeah, thanks. And I know we've been going around on this, but it is important. And Director Gisborne brings up a valid point. I mean, I'm comfortable earmarking the funds. If everything were the same today as it is when your budgets take effect at the city, then that's great. But things can change. The city's priorities could change, and all of a sudden we'd be paying for, a certain amount of dollars that for a lesser service. So I'm concerned that the service that we end up agreeing to today to pay for would actually be reduced. And then we'd be actually making a decision today on something that we don't know about. So if the city's having meetings like literally tomorrow about their budget, like to hear what that is. But I'm, totally prepared to earmark the funds, that's for sure.
Okay. You've spoken a lot.
I've spoken twice.
It's good. Nobody else is speaking, so I think we're gonna call the question.
Chair?
Director Gisborne.
Thank you, Chair. I move.
Okay, go ahead.
I move.
We have a motion in front of us.
Yes. I move that we refer this item to the March 11th Finance Committee meeting.
I second that.
Okay. All right. All in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Question period. Mr. Galinsky.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that. On that
Oh,
last,
I'm sorry. Hold on.
We're not.
I scrolled down too far. I apologize.
I think we have
We have
some.
new business 15.1 and we have a 15.2 as well.
Oh, we do.
We do.
Yeah,
That was added.
Oh, yes, that's right.
thank you, Chair, for 15.1.1 and 15.1.2. I just reviewed the video and it seems like this is the budget that the service participant members would like. So it would be good for our financial services department if you guys could, please.
I'll move them.
Okay, well, it's actually two different
I'll
motions.
move the first one, sorry.
Seconded by. Seconder, this is for the service review.
The service review for the sub-regional recreation complex.
Second by Director Lennox. Any discussion?
Be very brief. Yes, very brief. We are having these service review meetings. Originally, we thought, well, maybe we could drop it down to 5,000, but we said, let's do 10,000, to maybe facilitate working with the municipality. I know we've referred a lot of the other stuff to the finance committee meeting, but I think this one's fairly simple and it'll give the direction to our staff. So I'm happy to support it.
Okay, any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Motion carries. And two,
So moved.
seconded by Lennox. Any discussion? Seeing none, this is areas A, B, C, D, and E. Voting on this. When you vote, all in favor?
Yay.
Okay, none opposed, motion carries. Now, Mr. Galinsky, question period. I apologize.
no need for apology, Chair. You have to deal with the
Oh,
business.
shoot, I did it again. I'm rattled. Sorry. Yeah, we got the item 15.2.
Yeah.
He's
We have a motion in front of us. It's here.
No, it's the moratorium on the.
Oh, yes.
the street.
The enforcement.
Yeah. I'll move the motion, and if there's a seconder, I'll briefly discuss it.
Please keep it brief.
I'll be brief. This was discussed ad nauseum over at the planning committee. It pointed out that because, we didn't approve the rezoning and all that other kind of stuff, the property owner might be, running into a lot of stress. I do want to let everyone know that when we get to our planning committee at the end of March, my intention at the time is to bring forward to come back for reconsideration and then postpone it until we do get that Nootka Street zoning report. This motion just says, hey, we'll do a moratorium on the enforcement on that specific property related to that specific accessory dwelling unit for a period of 1 year. I hope that we get this issue sorted out in less than a year, but I figure, government, nothing goes fast. So I'd look forward to the support of everyone to just give the property owner a peace of mind while we sort out the Nootka Street zoning bylaw through our planning community services. Thank you, everyone.
Conversation. None, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. Now, okay, I haven't missed anything else, right?
No.
Okay,
Sure.
Mr. Galinsky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick question with regard to item 12.2. I believe the motion was to refer the matter to the March 11th Finance Committee. I think that was passed. Am I correct in that?
12.1?
Yes, that was the
Sub-regional recreation.
sub-regional recreation, yes.
Yes, that was referred.
Okay, that was my question, Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Very welcome. And we have a motion to go in camera.
I can do it. I move that the board move in camera the meeting be closed to the public on the grounds that the subject matter to be considered relates to matters covered by the community charter under section 91C, labor relations or other employee relations, and end the consideration of whether a board meeting should be closed under provision of this subsection or subsection 2.
Second by Director Lennox. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? None opposed, motion carries. We're going in camera.
Ooh, my desk is warm.
Recording in progress.
Okay, welcome back. We've reached the end of our agenda, so thank you for joining us.
Bye, Shelley.
Thanks for joining us. Have a good night.
Yeah, thank you.